Menki is an office worker living her boring life on a normal boring day, with superheroes fighting a boring tentacle monster right outside her window. This is a world where humanity has begun expanding their civilization into, and with the help of their pioneering heroes, they have succeeded in developing a new world. However, the people do still need to deal with the occasional tentacle monster here and there, which is where the hero agency comes into play. Normally, the people in this office would need to evacuate since the monster fight is happening next door, but at this point, none of them really care enough to run away, so it's pretty much if I die, then I die. In fact, Menki over there is still hard at work filling out a report, completely ignoring the monster out the window, and her boss loves her work ethic so much that he comes over to give her even more work to do. Meanwhile, Menki's coworkers are all gossiping about a rumor they heard that the company hired a humanoid robot recently, but the boss comes over and tells them to get back to work because he's not paying them to waste company time. Menki happened to overhear the rumor, but she doesn't think it really matters because whether it's a human, a humanoid robot, or even an alien, it doesn't change the fact that she's going to be stuck working at this office for the rest of her life. Meanwhile, right outside, the hero captain, Raymond, is getting ready to finish off the tentacle monster, but as he does so, the villain who was behind the whole attack gets sent flying into Menki's building, and he seems to be holding a bomb, so maybe she should have evacuated after all. Fortunately, before the bomb could go off, one of the heroes jumps in and kicks it out of the building just in time to save everyone inside. He also catches Menki before she could fall, but in the process, a green blob emerges from the necklace he was wearing and flies straight into Menki's head, and let me tell you, that was not a good thing. Menki passes out, so Yasin drags her to a nearby storage closet, and no matter how he looks at this, he's cooked. For now, he decides to get Menki to wake up, so he finds an adrenaline shot and stabs her with it to get the blood pumping again. Menki wakes up and is in shock because she feels like she just died, but Yasin clarifies that she didn't die, it was just a mild case of her heart stopping out of nowhere. That doesn't sound very mild to her, but that's the least of her problems because Yasin explains to her the green blob that flew into her head was actually an alien parasite, and it's worse than the shit going on in The Last of Us. Basically, it eats away at the host's brain until it takes full control of the body, and the only way to keep it at bay is to maintain high mental stimulation at all times. Which basically means, if Menki becomes bored, the parasite is going to eat her brain until she dies. Yasin tries remaining optimistic and tells her that as long as she does exciting stuff, she should be fine for the meantime. But that's a bit of a problem because she works at the most boring job imaginable, so she decides to just accept her fate and lays down to let the parasite do its thing. Yasin begins panicking and tells her not to give up because he's going to do whatever to make sure she stays alive. Menki doesn't understand why a hero like Yasin is willing to go so far to help her, and at first, you'd think he likes her or something, but no, it's just that if Menki dies, it will affect his performance metrics and he'd lose all his hero perks, so he wants to avoid that at all costs. However, listening to Yasin ramble on and on about the hero handbook makes Menki really bored, so the parasite gets a chance to start turning her brain into a smoothie, and all of a sudden, blood starts shooting out of her nose. Several minutes later, Menki wakes up and she is horrified when she takes a look at the room, because there's more blood in here than in one of Jigsaw's traps. She then spots the first aid kit on the floor, and apparently, Yasin performs some impromptu life-saving surgery to make sure Menki wouldn't die, but he warns her to be careful, because if another blood geyser happens, he won't be able to save her again. But then he remembers that it's kind of his fault that she's in this mess to begin with, so he apologizes for his mistake. He tells her that there's still hope for her survival because as long as she avoids being bored, she can live long enough for a cure to be found. But for her, that's a lot easier said than done. Her job is so mind-numbing that she'd have better luck watching paint dry to stay entertained, but Yasin encouraged her to do her best and starts giving a long motivational speech. However, Menki doesn't want to hear it from an exciting superhero like him. She asks Yasin if he'd be willing to swap lives with her if he's so invested in keeping her alive, since becoming a superhero like him is the only way she'd be able to avoid boredom long enough to survive. However, Yasin remains silent, and Menki sighs because she already assumed that Yasin was just bluffing when he said he wanted to help her. She heads for the door so she can return to her boring life. However, before she could leave, Yasin stops her and says he's willing to give her idea a shot. He will help her become a superhero until they can find a cure for the parasite, but even though he genuinely wants to help her, he's not exactly sure how to turn Menki into a hero. Just then, they hear a scream coming from the main room, so they rush out to see what's going on, and to their surprise, they discover that the villain has taken everyone hostage and is holding them at laser gunpoint. But there's still one lady in the back typing away at her computer because she couldn't care less about her life being threatened. Once the villain notices Yasin and Menki, he starts firing at them, forcing Yasin to drag Menki to safety before running out to deal with the grate. He manages to dodge the laser and knock the gun out of the villain's hands, after which he attempts to knock the villain out. But even though the dude looks like this is his first time seeing the sun in years, he actually knows how to run a fade. That said, Yasin is still stronger than him, so to gain the upper hand, he decides to target Menki as a distraction. And it goes exactly as planned because Yasin sacrificed himself and took a laser to the back to protect her. He tells Menki to run away while she still can, but she already decided that she wants to be a hero from now on. So instead, she confronts the villain and tries to find out what he wants. She asks him if he's here for money or revenge, but the villain simply tells her he's there to take out the AI robot that was recently employed by this company. Menki is a little stunned since she wasn't expecting an answer like that, and all the coworkers start murmuring amongst themselves because they'd be more than willing to hand over the robot to save their lives. Yasin tells everyone to be careful because the villain may be trying to trick them into lowering their guard, but no, he really is just a clanker hater. Menki asks if the villain will leave them alone as long as they hand over the robot, and he agrees, but he says he's not sure which one of them is the robot since they look identical to regular humans. Everyone immediately points their fingers at Menki, and they all accuse her of being the robot. After all, they've never seen her show facial expressions while working or join in on the office gossip before, and it definitely couldn't be the lady who has been typing this entire time, so it must be Menki. Menki tries to point out that the typing lady hasn't looked up from her computer this entire time, but the lady just sends a meme in the group chat that says, "I'm not a robot, LOL." And that's good enough for all her coworkers. Menki still insists that she's not the robot, but the villain points his laser at her and threatens to blow her head off unless she can prove that she's not a robot. Yasin gets in front of the villain and swears that Menki is not a robot, and he knows this because the parasite in her head can only attack organic beings, plus she did shoot out a ton of blood earlier. So she's definitely human, but he is still trying to keep that a secret, so he can't provide any proof that Menki is a human. All of a sudden, the boss steps forward and tells everyone that he is certain that Menki isn't the robot, and he knows this because he himself is the android that the company employed. Everyone is so shocked by this development that they don't know what to say, but one of Menki's coworkers thinks the boss is just trying to sacrifice himself in order to save Menki, and she is so moved that she offers herself up as well and claims to be a robot. All the other workers do the same and pile onto the villain, and to be honest, if they can do this, then they could have just jumped him when he first attacked. The boss is caught off guard by the behavior of his employees because he wasn't really trying to be heroic or anything. He really is the robot that the company hired. But by this point, no one is listening to him anymore. Yasin is relieved that the villain has been restrained, so all that's left is to take him into custody and return to base, but all of a sudden, the boss tackles the villain off the edge of the building for absolutely no reason. And normally, this wouldn't really matter, but before the villain falls to his doom, he managed to grab onto Menki's shirt, pulling her down with him, so in turn, Yasin was forced to dive down after her. And he's got that stone-faced expression the entire time because he really doesn't want to be doing this. Mainly because he can't fly, but he does have enhanced strength, so he pushes himself down to the ground first and opens his arms to catch Menki. However, he ended up messing up the timing, so Menki goes splat on the pavement. Two things to note here. It turns out that the boss really was an android, and Menki is still alive because the villain's body broke her fall, but she does have severe internal bleeding right now, so Yasin should probably get her to a hospital soon. Meanwhile, the office ladies see the boss's shattered robot body, and they are devastated to find out that he really was a robot since they were low-key hoping the boss would pipe them down one day because he was hot. As for Menki, it turns out that waiting to be taken to the hospital while most of your bones are broken is pretty boring, so the parasite takes effect again, and she starts shooting blood everywhere again. This was the end of episode 1. Subscribe to not miss the next part.